Good morning to our worship songs this morning and the reading of the word later. We're glad that you're with us today, and I hope you have a great day too. I'm trading my sorrow. I'm trading my shame. I'm laying them down for the joy of the Lord. I'm trading my sickness. I'm trading my pain. I'm laying them down for the joy of the Lord. Yes, Lord, yes, Lord, yes, yes, Lord. Yes, Lord, yes, Lord, yes, yes, Lord. Yes, Lord, yes, Lord, yes, yes, Lord. Amen. I'm trading my sorrows. I'm trading my shame. I'm laying them down for the joy of the Lord. I'm trading my sickness. I'm At this time, I have Brother Jerry Dale come and ministry to you with the Word of God. And may our ears be open to the Word.
This morning, I want to talk to you about that there are occurrences between heaven and earth. This old world is filled with paranormal phenomena. It is filled with mentionings about the demonic world, telling sensational stories and exaggerated remarks. For example, when the church talked, it was about miracles, while the skeptics called them coincidences. Daniel embraces the truths of the demonic forces in the real world, in the seen. The spiritual world is the unseen. And there are battles between heaven and earth. And some people sneer at that notion, and they dismiss it as mythology. But from the book of Daniel, we will see the seen as well as the unseen. And it will transform our understanding of prayer. But in Daniel chapter 9, Daniel was in the midst of a consecrated prayer when the angel Gabriel is sent to reveal to Daniel the mysteries of the 77s. And now in chapter 10, we find that Daniel is in intense prayer, emphasizing as fasting 3 long weeks. I want to read portions of Daniel 10 from the Message Bible. In the 3rd year of the reign of King Cyrus of Persia, a message was made plain to Daniel, whose Babylonian name was Belshazzar. The meaning was true. It dealt with a big war, and he understood the message, the understanding coming by revelation. During those days, I, Daniel, went into mourning over Jerusalem for 3 weeks. I ate only plain and simple food, no seasoning or meat or wine. I never even bathed or shaved until the 3 weeks were up. On the 24th day of the 1st month, I was standing on the banks of the great river, the Tigris. I looked up and, to my surprise, saw a man dressed in linen with a belt of pure gold around his waist. I, Daniel, was the only one to see this. I went weak in the knees, the blood draining from my face. I heard his voice. At the sound of it, I fainted, fell flat on the ground, face in the dirt. A hand touched me and pulled me to my hands and knees. Daniel, a man of quality, listen carefully to my message and get up on your feet. Stand at attention. I've been sent to bring you news. When he had said this, I stood up, but I was still shaken. Relax, Daniel. Don't be afraid. From the moment you decided to humble yourselves to receive understanding, your prayer was heard, and I set out to come to you. But I was waylaid by the angel prince of the kingdom of Persia, and was delayed for a good 3 weeks. But then Michael, one of the chief angel princesses, intervened to help me. I left him there with the prince of the kingdom of Persia, and now I'm here to help you understand what will eventually happen in your people. the vision has to do with what is ahead. Then the humble man-like figure touched me again and gave me strength. He said, "Don't be afraid, friend. Peace. Everything is going to be all right. Take courage. Be strong." Even as he spoke, courage surged up within me. I said, "Go ahead. Let my master speak that you've given me." I want to stop and say, two angels appearing could encourage anybody. And now it's very clear that this passage is exposing an unseen war being waged against God's people by demonic forces. And that there are angels that are ministering spirits sent from God to minister to the saints. While the demonic world is the innumerable host of the devil, engaged in the opposite objectives, and these two worlds come into conflict from on and on again. The skeptics hear of this and they rejected it. But the saints, the sincere believers, they accepted it. They believe in it. Donald Barhouse wrote a book, The Invisible War, which displays the pursuit of the unseen world, and there is an other world watching the events of this nation. This morning, I want to first turn not to Daniel 10. I would like to turn to Ephesians chapter 6, verse 10. "Finally, be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might." This is addressed to the child of God. "Put on the full armor of God so that you will be able to stand firm against the schemes of the devil." This shows you that the devil has a strategy, not here revealed, but elsewhere. Now, Paul tells us why we are to put on this full armor of God. In verse 12, it said, "For our struggle is not against flesh and blood." It's a struggle not with this world, but the unseen world around us. But against the rulers, against the powers, against the world forces of this darkness, against the spiritual forces of wickedness in the heavenly places. There is a world of invisible conflicts around us, and it is that world that causes defeat in the lives of believers, and it's causing despair in the lives even of the skeptics. The unbelieving world is a parapsychology. God calls it the rulers, the powers, the world forces of this darkness, the spiritual forces of wickedness in the heavenly places. So the scriptures tell us that there are three heavens. There is the immediate heaven, which we call the atmosphere heaven. There's the intermediate heaven, which we would call the stellar places, that vast host of stars above the second heaven. This third heaven, the presence of God. In 2 Corinthians 12, Paul talks about it being caught up in the third heaven, verse 3. Verse 4, into paradise, a place where God spoke revelation to Paul. Now it is in this angelic world, the second heaven, between the presence of God and the earth. We see that there's an interplay, an interference, and a conflict, and the spaces around us. And I have to believe that the scripture is true and that there are angels that do surround us. Who knows how many times we have had angelic assistances in all of our lives. With all of this being said, now we can turn to chapter 10 of the book of Daniel. The prophet. the time and the event recorded in Daniel 10. Let me read it to you from the Newest American Standard Bible. In the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia, a message was revealed to Daniel, who was named called Belshazzar. The message was true, but the appointed time was long, and he understood the message and had understanding of the vision. This would have been, at this time, in 335-334 BC, since Darius the Mede, historically known as Gobarium. Now, he reigned as Cyrus's viceroy until 338 and 337 BC. This is in the future. So if Daniel was born in 620 BC, and in 606 BC, he was taken into captivity into Babylon, and he's now at this particular time approximately in his 80s at this time. The 70 years of Jeremiah is now fulfilled. Babylon is conquered. Persia is now ruling. And this causes Daniel to go to God in prayer for 21 days of prayer meeting with God. In verse 3, it tells us, I ate no pleasure food, no meat or wine came into my mouth, nor did I anoint myself at all, till the 3 whole weeks were fulfilled. Now, he didn't take a bath. That might be, you can see by himself. But 21 days, nothing comes from heaven. No sound, no answers from heaven. The messenger in the vision is now revealed as Daniel is standing with some other men by the banks of the Tigris River, and Daniel saw a vision. Let's look at verse 4. Now on the 24th day of the 1st month, as I was by the side of the great river Tigris, I lifted my eyes and looked, and behold, a certain man, clothed in linen, whose waist was girded with gold of Euphrates. That's a place, a type of gold. Now his body was like beryl. Beryl is an aluminum rainbow, and see in this picture here, you see the crystalness of those colors. His face like the appearance of lightning, his eyes like torches of fire, his arms and feet like burnished bronze in color, and the sound of his words like the voice of a multitude. Now the angel of the Lord has been there, but now he's manifested himself to Daniel. And verse 7 said, and I, Daniel, alone saw the vision, for the men who were with me did not see this vision. Apparently, an angel can manifest himself to one person in a group. But a great terror fell upon them. They didn't see what Daniel saw, but they were unprepared, and a great fear fell upon his friends there, so that they fled to hide themselves. And therefore I left alone when I saw this great vision, and no strength remained in me, and my vigor was turned in fertility in me, and I retained no strength. So even though Daniel sought God for 21 days, he wasn't ready for this super phenomena, and physically his vigor and his strength left him. And verse 9 said, yet I heard the sound of his words. And while I heard the sound of his words, I was in deep sleep on my face, with my face to the ground. Emotionally overwhelmed, Daniel passed out and slumped to the ground as soon as he had heard the angel speak. Suddenly, verse 10, a hand touched me. Talk about being touched by an angel, which made me tremble on my knees and on the palms of my hands. And he said to me, "Oh, Daniel," this must have been Gabriel, "man greatly beloved, understand the words that I speak to you, and stand upright, for I have now been sent to you. Daniel, God has sent us to you. That's what they're declaring. And then Daniel said, while he was speaking this word to me, I stood trembling. We need to look at 5 principles. Whenever we're going to go to God in prayer, they will help us to understand what can happen and what will happen. For instance, the first one is when the believer prays, their prayers are immediately heard by God. Verse 12, Daniel was speaking and said to me, he said, this angel, I believe it's Michael, that's my thoughts. Do not fear, Daniel, for from the first day that you set your heart to understand and humble yourself before your God. Your words were heard, and I have come because of your words. Because a child of God could not transcend the space between the second heaven and the third heaven, but he can pray, and the answer will be on the way. The day you uttered it is declared, God heard it. The delay is never between our mouth and God's ears. Daniel had uttered the request, but on the way it became intercepted. Verse 13, but the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days. This is probably Gabriel speaking. Let's look at the second one here. The second principle about prayer is demonic forces, they can delay answers to prayer. So don't give up. Hold on. The edification of the princes of Persia and the involvement is that he withstood this for 21 days. Some that read this think that this is the king of Persia. But if you read the first verse, they know who he is. He was known as Cyrus, king of Persia. The word that is there is a Hebrew word, S-A-A-R. And from it, it means a military sense, a general, a reference to one who oversees. Edward J. Young says the prince is not the king of Persia, for the thought here is that of spiritual warfare. To be sure that this was an evil angel, a demon. And so powerful was he that he was able to hinder Daniel's prayers for 3 weeks. Daniel had been seeking the mind of God, and on the first day an angel was dispatched, hindered by the hostile spirit of the king of Persia. And the answer was hindered until, verse 13, the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days, and behold, Michael, the archangel, one of the chief princesses, came to help me, for I had been left alone there with the king of Persia. Carl Keel stated that the prince of Persia was a spirit being, yet not the heathen national god of the Persians. But when we look at this in W.C. Stevens, the episode points out and suggests to us the governmental organization of Satan's interest exists in the sky, corresponding and interlocking with the governmental organizations in the earth. With this in mind, there may be a prince of England. They may even say there's a prince of another entity. But something is taking place in this whole thing. In 1 John 5:19, it says the whole world lies in the power of the evil one. Literally, the evil one of this world is carefully watched over by the evil one and all the prince of Persia in this particular text. And this system stopped the angel for 21 days. And the rank of the prince apparently outranked the messenger angel, and that is why he is called Michael, the archangel. But the Hebrew word that is used, S-A-A-R, Daniel had been unaware of the spiritual conflict that had been taking place between heaven and earth as a result of his prayer. And it appeared that Michael had a greater power than the good angel or the wicked one. And it comes to the point that Michael is there to be with them. Now, we see in verse 14 probably Gabriel saying, "Now I've come to make you understand what will happen to your people in the latter days, for the vision refers to many days yet to come." When he had spoken this word to me, I turned my face towards the ground and became speechless. And suddenly, one having the likeness of the sons of men touched my lips. Then I opened my mouth and spoke, trying to say to him, and stood before him, "My Lord, because of the vision, my sorrows have overwhelmed me, and I have restrained no strength." That leads us to the third principle of prayer, and that is wrestling in prayer. It is exhausting. Maybe you are sitting there this morning and you are exhausted in your prayers for your families. And I just want to remind you that just one touch in verse 16 will make a difference in all of our lives. In verse 17, Daniel, "For how can this servant of my Lord talk with you, my Lord? As for me, no strength remains in me now, nor is any breath left in me." The most significant battle that is ever fought is the one fought on your knees. Years ago, I heard a preacher saying this, that you'll never be any taller than you are on your knees. That's when you get up before God, and God sees you, cares, and moves upon you. It had exhausted a toil on the body of Daniel, fatigue, because of the curbing of the evil and the furthering things that were happening to him. It leads us now to a fourth of those that we must understand. Following weariness, times of prayer, strength returns, and extra measure. Because Daniel was not only touched by God, he was told that God was with him, and that God had this to him. Notice verse 18. "Then again, the one having the likeness of man touched me and strengthened me. And he said," Michael probably said this, "O man, greatly beloved, fear not. Peace be to you. Be strong, be strong." This is the second time greatly beloved is ever said about Daniel. In verse 19, it goes on to say, "So when he spoke to me, I was strengthened, and he said, 'Let my Lord speak, for you have strengthened me.' And soon as the angel touched Daniel, following all the weariness of times of prayer, strength returned in extra measure to Daniel." So we see that when a believer does pray, it's immediately heard by God. And that the principle is that the demonic forces can delay the answers to your prayers sometimes. The wrestling in prayer, it is an exhausting work. And following wearisome times of prayer, strength returns in extra measure. And the fifth one is this, is that overcoming demonic forces is not a once and for all matter. The involvement is the Prince of Persia. And it should be and would be followed by a prince of Greece. And that's with Alexander the Great and the evils on that side too. Verse 20, Daniel said, Michael probably he's writing down the words of Michael. "Do you know why I come to you? And now I must return to fight with the prince of Persia. And when I have come, indeed the prince of Greece will come. The battles are going to continue, but the angels will continue to fight the fight." In verse 21, "But I tell you what is noted in the scriptures of truth. No one upholds me against me except Michael, your prince. Now, two things are standing out here. In verse 20, it starts with a quotation that ends with this chapter, but includes with chapters 11 and 12. So this is an incomplete thought. I will tell you. This is a PS, a postscript. And verse 21 is a private message to Daniel. No one upholds me against thee except for Michael, your prince. Aren't you glad that you have a prince? He's going to fight for you. He's going to stand in there for you. The toughest of all things, he'll be there. Over in 2 Kings chapter 6, you find a story about two nations, a prophet, and how that something was going to do and take place. When you look at this story, you see there's a king of Syria. It's called Aram, a name called Ben-Hadad. And the prophet of Israel is a man named Elisha. It's a simple story about a king who simply wanted to know who was giving away all his strategic military moves. Let me read these to you. These three people were involved in it. Now the king of Aram was warring against Israel, and he counseled with his servants, saying, in such and such a place shall be my camp. The man of God, that's Elisha, sent word to the king of Israel, saying, beware that you do not pass this place, for the Arameans are coming down there. The king of Israel sent to the place about the man of God, told him, thus Elisha warned the king of Israel, so that he guarded himself there more than once or twice. Now, the heart of the king of Aram was enraged over this thing. He called his servants and said to him, will you tell me which of us for the king of Israel? One of his servants said and came to him, no, my lord, O king. But Elisha the prophet who is in Israel tells the king of Israel the word that you speak in your bedroom. So the king of Aram said, go and see where he is, that I may send and take him. It was told him, saying, behold, he is in Dothan. He sent horses and chariots and a great army there, and they came by night and surrounded the city. In verse 15, now when the attendants, the helper of Elisha, known as the attendant, the man of God, had risen early and gone out, behold, an army with horses and chariots was circling the city. And Elisha, servant, said to him, alas, my master, what shall we do? So he answered Elisha, do not fear, for those who are with us are more than those who are with them. Verse 17. Then Elisha prayed and said, O Lord, I pray upon his eyes that he may see. And the Lord opened the servant's eyes, and he saw. Here's what he's seen, and he's seen also the unseen. And behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. And that we could come to that point and realize the supports that God gives to each and every one of us. We would be amazed at the presence of God all around us. In verse 18, it said, when they came down to him, Elisha prayed to the Lord and said, okay, God, strike this people with blindness, I pray. So he struck them with the blindness according to the words of Elisha. Then Elisha said to them, this is not the way, nor is this the city. Follow me, and I'll bring you to the man whom you see. Whom he brought him to the city of Samaria, their enemies. And they suddenly, they seen, and they were terrified where they were. We have to become encouraged when we see the invisible. We should be encouraged by the invincible might of God that is within us. In 2 Corinthians 10:4 and 5, it says, "For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty in God for pulling down strongholds, casting down arguments and everything that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, bringing every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ." Over in John 12, verse 31, Jesus foretold of his death. He said, "Now judgment is upon this world. Now the ruler of this world will be cast out." Satan is going to be beat. He can't win. Because now it's not Gabriel, it's not Michael, it's the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ who brings us the victory. Let's pray. Father God, we thank you, Lord, because of your grace, your mercy, and watching over us. We ask you, Lord, to lead us and guide us in all the things that you're trying to do. But, Lord, let us become a people of prayer. And, Lord, I know next week I want to talk about prayer and why we need to get before God. But, Father, I'm asking you, Lord Jesus, to strengthen our church, no matter what's going on in the world today, no matter how many sicknesses and diseases that we know not of. But we know you, and we know that you care for us. Father, touch your people. In Jesus' name, amen.